ask a question? So the idea is to look at validation techniques, effectiveness evaluation, resistance, and buy-in from stakeholders. So we've already touched on some of these topics, and anyone who's in a position where they're wanting to try and get some changes going at their institution or department or course may want to get some tips.
Yeah.
All right.
Just say, Lee, just to start that, you know, diagnostic testing is not new. Don and I were just chatting about this at breakfast. This later on in my talk, I'll show a bit of literature review, and I can share that with you. You know, at least 35 years ago, people were doing this in the UK, London, Alison, and Tony Croft at Coventry and Loughborough University. We're looking at their students coming in with A levels and O levels in the UK, and they basically give the same test every year for about 10 years for the solid standard dropping so up. But B grade in 1990 was C grade or whatever, 2000. Just say what we're doing is not new. Diagnostic testing seems to have gone out of fashion for a while now.
It's very much
back in fashion again.
And the adaptive testing approach is also not new. Microsoft and Cisco and big tech companies have been using that for years for their certification examination.
Just to say we're not founding members of Diagnostic.
Yeah, scale part is really important. Coming in, but then also answering the question, what happens next? You know, we always had a diagnostic test, but it was stagnant. And if a student got a particular score, I never really knew why, because it was a one-shot deal. Did they get that score because that's their knowledge base? Did they get that score because they were having a bad day? Did they get that score because they're a bad test taker? And then they got that score. Well, what can I do for them to help them improve their score? And that's where the adaptive really comes in, because it can, at least in our institution, prime a learning map. And so having that score then feed into something else where I can get a better understanding, as can the student. Did I learn that and I forgot it, and that's why I got it wrong? So am I in a recall learning scenario, or did I never know it? And am I in a first time learning experience? And the answer to that question is really important, because we treat those differently. If a student's recalling, that's a different trajectory than a first time learning experience. And that's a really hard thing to answer unless you start to understand more from looking at the adaptive testing, a student going into a learning module and sort of seeing the rate of learning. So when they're in the learning module, if you're in a recall, you tend to have this sort of exponential growth and like, okay, it's coming back to me, the cobwebs are leaving, and they're kind of progressing at a good rate. First time learning students, they're in the learning module and they're more flatlining because they're just figuring it out for the first time. And so their progress speed is much slower. But we didn't have that information before, and that's been really helpful for students as well, because then I don't necessarily have to convince them as hard. Like maybe the prerequisite course is a better choice. Maybe you really don't want to push that hard to be in that class. First semester of uni is really difficult anyway. Being maxed out in your math class might not be the right choice. You know, go in someplace where you have some level of confidence, versus someplace it's going to be just a struggle on day one. If that helps, that first time versus recall understanding of students.
That was one of the biggest rationale for us using Maths Fit with service courses. So we started with commerce and agriculture. So these are students who want to get a commerce degree or an agriculture degree. They're not aware that they have to do mathematics as a mandatory module in their first semester or first year. And an awful lot of them, well, in our institution, maybe 10 to 15%, which is a lot for our institution, would fail that mathematics module. So they have 6 modules, 6 courses in their first semester. They might be, if you're an ag student, soil science and food and nutrition, stuff like that, stuff that they really want to study. And then there's this maths module that they fail. Then they carry that module into semester 2.
So now they've got 6 new modules and this extra maths one that they have to sit again. And they're putting all their time into this mathematics module, where their interest is in food nutrition or whatever it is. And we just found like this is a major disservice of the student. They're putting all this time into the mathematics. Mathematics is not their thing. They just want to pass it and forget about it forever. So we just thought, well, how can we support these students from day one, not at Christmas when they failed their first mathematics module, but from day one or day 0, even the week before is when Maths Fit runs, and we try and in a student-centered possible way to try and get them to engage with the math supports, whether it is the videos or the numbers questions. I should just say, like, I have a lot of evidence, and I'll talk about it later on from the student perspective, because there's some papers out there. What do the students think? And that's kind of back to Anita's point about institutional buy-in and stuff like that. Like, a lot of lecturers will say, no way, you're not running a diagnostic with my students. So they're already frightened enough. I don't want them to be put off mathematics and scared. But we asked the students, and we asked them in depth in surveys and in interviews, and there's other evidence from other papers that have been published. The students want this. They're quite happy to do a diagnostic. They want to know where they are at that particular point in time, what they need to revise, and what type of mathematics is going to be used in the course going forward. Now, they don't always see the connection between the basics of mathematics and what is in their course. That's across the board. That's probably our job. We need to do a better job on that. But students in the main, very high percentages want diagnostic testing, not just diagnostic testing, they want the supports that follow up that. And the good students are delighted to get their couple of percent. And for the students, that is high stakes. We might think offering them 2 or 3% of a course to take a diagnostic is low stakes, but students will do anything for 1% or 1% or 2. So it's a great carrot for the confident students. It builds their confidence even more with the students who probably already know they're going to struggle. It's kind of a wake-up call in week 0 or week 1. So I think a lot of that institutional resistance, or even from lecturers or from admin people, having that kind of evidence base to say, well, we took a survey of 2,000 students. The students want it. They want it in week 0. They don't want it in the middle of their course when they're already taking midterms and stuff like that. So I think that's important thing. If you're thinking of doing it, it's not just good for us, it's the students actually agree with it.
And then, yet as Anthony was saying, this year you've got new course conveners and they decide, no, we're a bit cautious. We're not going to do that. And it's like, they've got the right to do that. Although you've got all this evidence to show. That must have been very frustrating.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the first year the course ran just 2 modules, agriculture and business. And the business lecturer was all for it. And he was happy to give 3 1/3% of his course to it. The agriculture person was happy to run the diagnostic, but was not happy to give any assessment to it. And I can understand it because it wasn't really his assessment. We were designing it. But again, the engagement was, I think, 90% with the commerce students and maybe 40% with the, so it was really the ag students we wanted to get, because they were a little bit weaker than the business students. So they were trying it maybe the first time, fall off a cliff at the second attempt. No one was trying it for the second, but they'd already moved on into week 1 or whatever. Was the business students, because it was that carrot of 3.3%, they were willing to try it again if they got bronze or silver bronze, and watch videos and take numbers questions. But it ultimately comes down to the module coordinator. They're the owner of their module, so if they want it. But a lot of lecturers said, I want it, but I want to see more evidence of it working, and I want to put it as one of my learning outcomes. On the module descriptors, they will put down, like, in this course you will learn how to find the slope of a line or whatever it is, but the lecturers want to put in, you will learn the basics of, or you will revise the fundamentals of mathematics that are required for you to be a nutritionist or whatever it is, whatever the course degree is. So they want it to be part of the learning outcomes of the module. At the moment, it's kind of not standalone, but it's like an add-on at the beginning. So we need to do a piece of work there to embed it more into the course, and with the module coordinator's permission or agreement, I think that is possible. But it does come down to kind of personal opinions and people's beliefs about mathematics teaching and knowledge.
I mean, I think we're lucky on our campus that not initially, but eventually we got campus-wide buy-in. And so every single student has to take that assessment, independent of whether they're going to take quantitative work or not. But in reality, they're all taking some quantitative work. It just might not be a math class. And so because every single student has to take it, 1, we have a very large domain, but 2, we get a lot of data. But students who score poorly quantitatively that is also an indicator of just general preparation. So they might not be prepared in other disciplines as well coming to campus. That's usually a good advising instrument for having that conversation with the advisor. Well, is it just a quantitative preparation that you're lacking, or is this going to bleed over into other things you might have in your first caseload of courses? But also the cost of failure is really high for incoming first semester students. I mean, if they fail that class, as Anthony said, then they have to retake it. So, I mean, that's an actual cost to the student, but it's also an emotional and psychological cost to that student. They came to university, they thought they were prepared, they thought they're going to be successful, and they have to recover from that. There's also a cost to the institution, because we are now paying someone to advise that student into their new schedule, paying someone to reteach that student. And I don't know how it is on your campuses, but on our campus, classes are full to the brim. So you've taken that seat twice, which means that you might have taken that seat from someone else at least once, if not more. Or if you have a large number of students who get into the situation, we've had to hire more faculty to teach. Room sizes are bigger than they need to be. And space is a big issue in our campus. If you have, 40% of your students coming out of your room during the semester, you have a room that's the wrong size. That's like a crowbar to the kneecaps kind of event. And so there's lots of these other things that we don't think about, but non-success is not just the student non-success, which is obviously really detrimental, but it has other costs campus-wide that we don't always see initially, let alone if that 4-year or 3-year degree then forces into an extra semester and a delay of program because of that non-success. And at least for us, that means you went summer and an extra semester. That's 6 more or 9 more months out of the workforce, or that you can't get into that lifelong earning. So staying longer on campus has long-term ramifications as well.
So that kind of leads on to my question about the timing of it. So for maths, but it sounds like it's part of your curriculum throughout the year. And then for your side, it's a semester before you actually start first.
So once you're admitted, so our admissions, like, you're accepted Illinois, will start going out any day now. And then that opens up, because I have found from looking, at least for us, you want about a 4-month window. If it's any longer than that, we're getting a lot of cobwebs, like, hey, I saw that. So 4 months before the course starts. So April 15th, maybe it's the 14th this year, it'll open up, and all students that have been admitted are told to do it. And if they have scheduled their summer advising, so all students meet with an advisor over the summer to plan their schedule, you cannot have that meeting if you have not done your assessment. And so you will get bombarded with emails like, your appointment's coming up and it's going to get canceled and you have to take this. And also why we want that to happen very early is we can now identify students for summer bridge. Like if we have students that their scores are really low, then I can go to the office of the provost and say, here are the students that I think need to come to summer bridge. And we will pay for those students to come early to campus to get some extra support beyond just math.
How long is summer bridge?
Summer bridge is 3 weeks. It's a free residential program on campus.
Wow.
Yes. And so, and that helps me identify, and we can start to look, like we know that there's certain underserved school districts or low sending counties that I know might be more at risk for needing summer bridge. So getting partnered with those advisors. Or did something go horribly wrong? Like, what if I see this particular high school, the transcripts all say this, but all the student scores say that? Then we start to recognize that there's a misalignment between what they say they're doing and what it appears that they're doing. But that summer bridge information is critical. Plus, it gives students time. Like Anthony says, their students can do it in week 0. If our students find out, in May that they're really not prepared for the class that they think they want to take at the end of August, they have a couple months to do something about it. Use the learning module that's, connected. It's primed by the diagnostic, go to summer school, pick up a book on your own, but time is critical for students. And I found on average, students who engage in the learning module to prepare for fall, it's about 10 hours. It's not like we're asking them to do 100 hours, because again, they're not in a first-time learning experience, the majority of them. It's just trying to synthesize, fill in some of those gaps. Oh, I learned that incorrectly, and just kind of put it all back together. But yes, happens early, because then that allows for other things to happen.
That's a luxury we would love to have, but in Ireland with Maths Fit, by the time they take their leaving certificate, the mathematics, that's around the middle of June. By the time they get their results, it's August. By the time they get their offer of university, it's the end of August, and they're starting university first week of September. So we have to utilize that week 0, but then there's people who get second round offers, third round offers, fourth round offers, that could go into October. So they're starting, maybe have missed the first 4 weeks of semester, and they're joining very late, but they've got in on a fourth offer because people didn't take the place and they move up one place. So we try and embed the Maths Fit from the beginning, but it's not ideal. And again, talking about the embedding, we used to just have it available, I think, for 2 or 3 weeks. So the refresher course was there, first attempt was available, and the second attempt was available maybe for 10 days after the first attempt was taken. And then we took it down. We just closed it in terms of the bright space, what the students see on their VLE. And the lecturers wanted that as well, because again, they saw it as a kind of an add-on or an extra. I don't want students get confused with Maths Fit when they should be doing my matrix theory or whatever it is. So we closed it off. But then the students would email and say, where did the refresher course go? Where did the Maths Fit? I want to have another go at that, because I did poorly in my first assignment and it was basic quadratic equations I was getting wrong. So we then use those emails, say, listen, the lecturer, students actually want the refresher course. And now all the lecturers, I say there's 5 involved, but they have allowed us to leave Maths Fit open for the entire semester. So it's there. The quiz can be retaken, the refresher course, all the videos, all the numbers, questions, all the feedback. So it's there. And we can see from the analytics, students use it right through the semester. So
Western Sydney, we had a similar thing. We used to run a refresher course for 3 weeks before the start of the academic year that was face-to-face. Of course, COVID put paid to all that. We had to move the whole thing online. And it's now, I think it still is, a series of videos, numbers, practice questions, mastery questions. So there's a whole structure to it, and that's available year round now for the students, so they can come back and use it as a refresher anytime through the year.
Right, sorry, we had a question at the back.
Silver and bronze. And you give the student the feedback of the score, but I was wondering whether the student gets a bit more than just a score. Would they get, how they performed in the test, so that they have an idea of the actual, areas that they couldn't do? Because I'm thinking of how do we, I use the word prime students to take ownership of their learning, So if they can see the gaps and start mapping out a learning map for themselves and knowing how to navigate through these resources, I think that would be important. And then also with AI right here, how does AI become a conversation tool? Because that's what I'm struggling with in my own courses now. I want my students to use AI as a prompt and a conversational tool in order to support their learning pathways, if I can put it that way. So I was just interested whether it was just these broad categories, here's your score, or was there something more?
Yeah, so I guess
it's still evolving. So year 1, we say 2020, it was quite basic. Here's the score you got on each. So we have 3 categories. There's trigonometry, there's functions and calculus, and there's algebra. And we would tell them, because there's only 8 questions on each, if you got 7 out of 8 or 8 out of 8, that's gold. 6 out of 7, I think, was silver. So that was quite basic. Then I think on the second year, we would say, here's the questions you got wrong, and here's a video that revises that. I think in year 1, we didn't even have a video. I think we just had the PDFs and some numbers questions. So it's kind of now the luxury of having a PhD student. I mean, that's why I want to share this knowledge. We all can't have PhD students working around the clock on these things, but because she's done that work, I think it should be shared. So she would put an awful lot of work into looking at where students went wrong in the first year, massive Excel sheets and spreadsheets, and she would say, okay, they're all getting functions and calculus poorly done. So we would try to be a bit more granular in the second year and say, this is where you went wrong. Or if they were doing really poorly with the bronze, we really encouraged them to make an appointment, a face-to-face appointment, when it was online in the first year because of COVID, but we still allow online appointments, but we for our students to come in, just to even see the Math Support Centre space, see that it's a supportive environment and they can get help there. But yeah, I think with AI, we could probably leverage that in terms of getting more granular with here's where you went wrong and here's the feedback on it. I don't know how to do that, but I'm sure it's the learning curve we have just
I mean,
travailed is harder, I'm sure.
we use a product that was developed by researchers a long time ago. It's now a commercial project. It wasn't when we started, but it does prime that learning module. And so with that score, it then directs you in, and it won't ask you to work on things that you've already mastered, but it also won't ask you to do things that you have no hope of solving. And so if Anthony and I both, got the same score, we could have very different learning modules in front of us. It might be that Anthony really bombed the trigonometry section, and so he could have a lot of focus there. And it could be that I'm doing all exponential logs. So that singular score, although is highly predictive just of course access and course success, our weaknesses and where we need to practice could be very different. And so, and I think that's what the students really liked, at least on our campus, is that when they went into that remediation, I don't like that word, but I haven't found a good one to replace it with. It was very targeted. So they felt like they were making progress that made sense to them. And then they could see the benefit of that. And then after they learned so many topics, they were automatically reassessed. Because I love mathematics, but I certainly don't want to do a bunch of problems I already know how to do. And there's plenty of problems in the world that I have no clue of doing. And if I was presented with those, I would stop as well. And I think the other thing that I've seen, and then I'll stop talking because I like to talk, is that it allows you to choose. So when you go into the learning module, I see students do that a lot. Like, well, maybe I'll do an exponential and logs question, but it looks like I need some things over here in functions as well. So I think when they get kind of frustrated with something, instead of just giving up, sometimes they're just shifting over to do something else. And so they're sticking with it a little bit longer versus most math practice is very linear. And so if you get question 7 wrong, books closed, you're done, because there's no way I'm going to get number 9 if I can do number 7. And so I think the ability to slide the topic list at the top, it's just like, oh, I'll go over here and do some of that.
Go sideways.
Yeah, they go sideways. They go to a different branch of the tree. How's the view over here? Oh, looks great. That has really engaged them to stick it out a little bit longer.
Yeah,
There's a
yes, my question was, so I teach maths and I teach computers, right? Computer skills and science. And we have a similar problem with computers, or at our institution. My colleague of you also. So they enter university and we're expecting a certain amount of computer skills or literacy. No, you know what I mean? It's crazy, man. It's varying levels. In our case, typically gets on the lower scale, where students don't want a mouse. So you just open my mind on that aspect. Now to my UCT colleagues, I'm from CPUT, we have this exam called the NBT, right? To enter. Which supposed of all, our curriculum is we have a national exam, am I correct? So we all write the same matric paper or grade 12 paper, the leaving certificate, whatever. So we have this NBT, which allows a student to enter to a university. But the thing is, I don't know what happens to that particular test, man. You know what I mean? Because that test also is some kind of benchmark to determine whether you're able to enter into a traditional university or you'll go to another institution. So, and so my question actually is like, when you guys come into like UCT or you're doing your first year math, do you feel that like the math you were learned in grade 12 was adequate for your first year? Does it like kind of gel in nicely? For like my experience, it was a bit jarred. Where there were topics, but it felt like I still had to You know what I mean? Adjust myself. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
I think even if, I think part of the issue is that even though there's a national exam, I mean, students are sort of coming in with various degrees of like, of quality of teaching, right? So I mean, a lot of students, even if they manage to sort of scrape by the national exam, because the pass rate's been made lower and lower over time. A lot of students are still really just like not proficient in the topics that are sort of said to be there. So it's kind of like, it's almost worse because it's masquerading as if like there is sort of some like benchmark that everyone's coming in with, but it's really not the case at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate that because that's, I mean, because you need to make a diagnostic test idea is that you want to, you
Yeah.
know, either you like, you mentioned on like setting the bar, like you're supposed to know this, or we have to figure out where you are so we can actually get you on the right path. But I mean, for me, the computer thing is a big thing to me because I'm realizing now that I gotta work on some diagnostic around that. Yeah, anyway, that's it's more for.
Yeah, and spread the word to your colleagues who aren't here. They're really.
Well, I think the whole diagnostic idea works for any subject. It's not math specific. That this idea of a knowledge map and of having connections between concepts is not specific to mathematics.
Yeah.
But I really like what you said about that. It's actually not just a diagnostic thing, but it actually is a tool for them to actually like learn stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what's important in math. I can go here, I can go here. Oh, I can't do this. I mean, that's just that in the discipline of. So yeah.
At Western Sydney, we had students we had some diagnostics for the refresher module. That's sort of where I got into it. And we had students who would just keep working through the refresher module questions rather than going into the content that we were recommending them to go to and learning from the diagnostic.
Yeah.
So.
I want to add one more thing, and that is, I think one of the real key importance of the diagnostic is that back to that advisor burden. There are students who are transitioning to higher education who might even be well prepared, but are struggling for other reasons. And so when we have this diagnostic and a policy and supports built around that, it frees up advisors to address issues of students who might have more complex issues coming to higher ed. And so the more we can streamline and put structure around and adaptive, there are students who are well prepared, who are homesick or time management or just all these other things, or just didn't get those opportunities to synthesize knowledge. So a real benefit to adaptive diagnostic, the built-in supports, having advisor support built in, is then we can address students who have more complex issues. There becomes time for that. And that's desperately needed for students that we don't want to lose, that we want to help, get through that first semester.
So 1, 2.
I just want to mention something because I think like I can relate the diagnostic to and education goes to multiple use back at home because back at home when you want to do engineering.
Where is home?
Congo, yes.
Congo. Okay.
Firstly, you have to do the math test before you enter engineering faculty.
Right.
Secondly, when you're engineering faculty, you don't start at the first year. You do what you used to call a preparative, it's like a year zero, where the brush maths and physics and everything, so that you can prepare for first year. But we've get the advantage with us that preparative. It's not like you do that so that the preparing, but you have to pass for you to go. But the way there's certain people we're given, you come and do a special math. So you mean if you notice that this is gonna be a waste of time instead of me starting in the first year and being in year zero, you can say I'm coming to write only special math. So the test on special math, once you pass special math, you are now admitted to first year engineering. So that's the diagnosis and refresh course used to be what we call preparative. So you were in the year zero before you started, but you have first to pass the year zero for you to start first year engineering. So instead of we used to do a 6 year for us to graduate as an engineer. So we do preparative, then first year, second year, third year to mini project, and you go first year, I think honors, and second year, then you graduate as an engineer.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. Things.
So engineering first they say you have to write a test to be admitted. It used to be math and physics. Now with the reform of the curriculum, now they start now straight at full year, they become, they start, but we used to do first preparatic. And it was math, it used to be data, you go, algebra, and everything we define. So they match the concept and the course, refresh, the refresh course that you mentioned. So now it's not about mathematics, they also brush it on the physics, anything that they prepare you for engineering, then you have to pass that.
Yeah, I just think for like, I don't know, this 4-year engineering degree lie. I don't think engineering degree should be 4 years anyway. The doctors want 7 years, the base. No, I'm just saying like this, and I think the only reason why it's 4 years because they want like to show the government we've graduated so many people. No, I'm just saying I don't know. I'm just thinking I'd rather do like, and I was fortunate I did that. Like a year, my first year was split. I was a part of this team. My first year was split into like, my first semester was split into a year. And that time actually gave me a lot of time. We had a lot of these small tests and fixed a lot of my wrongs from high school. I got into first year like properly.
Probably the most important year.
Yeah. So I just think it's 4 years not enough.
No.
I don't know who's six or something.
So-
it's okay.
She had.
Okay.
For me, it's not a question. I feel like it's a comment. Most of grade 12s, they have higher marks when they come from high school, but when they get to varsity and then the marks drops.
Yeah.
So I think for us, they just like, this week it's orientation week and next week it's classes. So there is no time for us to literally like, check if they in their standard or what. So when you teach, you think, okay, everyone is understanding, but now along the way you say, it's not given, and now the time has already passed. So I was thinking this test can actually work very well because like we do chapters like trig, differentiation, integration, then maybe before you start a certain chapter, then you take a portion of what is here. Like for instance, before they start differentiation, then normally they start with that in after July. Then during those holidays, you give them this. And then now they work on themselves when it's time to reopen. So you don't have to go through each and everything, the basics, then you have. So I think for us, it can work if maybe we can do it chapter by chapter, and then we just only like incorporating what we are doing, like the chapter.
I mean, even during the year, still, you cannot just, obviously start to get that. I'm just, it's really amazing.
So right, students are so strategic.
And they're so time poor that they're only going to look at what do I need for tomorrow?
Yeah.
What do I need for the next hour? If we get students coming into math sports and I have an exam in an hour. Borrow your calculator and can you show me how to do this? But you're so right. I think no point throwing the whole book at them. They're not going to look at that. Just give them what they need
just in time.
Just in time.
And I think they're bad self-evaluators. Like, I have a lot of students like, well, I took this class in high school and I got an A, so I must know it all. And, they really don't know. So I think having those just-in-time topics come in gives them an opportunity to be like, well, maybe I didn't know that as well as I think. And with some sort of honor to that, before that it goes sour on the exam, just getting caught up a little bit before, like, oh, I need to practice a bit because they really don't know that they don't know.
So we've got Tatiana and then Jacob. I didn't see who was first.
Connect the dots. For example, just in time, you eat and they don't have time. There is a window of opportunity for our students in South Africa if they do write NBTs, by the way. Because they start writing in April and they finish by the time the deadline passes for the institution. So for UCT, I think it's October. So from October, then they do have that window of opportunity, and they also get the shock of their lives because school was telling them you are 90% in medicine until you write NBTs, and now suddenly you're 40%. So that communication and maybe telling them that go and do something because you are in, but you're going to be struggling. So maybe that is one area to.
And I think there's a national need for that. Nationally, everyone does NBTs. Why don't we nationally offer them some
Yes,
support.
Something where they can actually take ownership and be proactive about their
Yes.
learning so that they don't.
Exactly. And it doesn't, we're not forcing any institution to use the diagnostic, but it's actually for the sake of the students who themselves are interested in getting the diagnosis.
I think
Yeah.
that actually means Dr. Reddy.
Yeah.
The stat of that 1% is like how many students again? 1% is 80 students, and that means so much money. If you just have one statement, I promise you, a lot of people.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
And that was the purpose, and that wasn't even, me. And on Tatiana's point, I got money 1 year, I called them Mentus. But for all the incoming students, because we had their diagnostic, they've been you have months, time to do something. And I just hired some undergraduate upperclassmen to reach out via email to students like,
Okay.
we're so excited you're coming to campus, now is a great time to really think about going up and brushing up those math and chemistry, that's the other one, skills, and if you have any questions, I took these courses. And so it was a very high contact, low cost initiative to just reach out. They all were given like 50 students. They just reached out a couple of times.
That's such a
And the
lovely
students felt
idea.
welcome.
Yeah.
I got a nice email from an upperclassman. And they were telling me that, I should really take advantage of my time now and to answer questions. So I think there's a way to do that engagement.
Great idea. I love it.
Yeah.
Jacob.
Yeah, so gosh, I mean, I suppose I sort of initially wanted to say this in the context of you speaking about this kind of thing used as a method, not only of diagnostic, but also of students practicing. You were saying you like saw students wanting to do that as well. Is as far as I'm aware, in South Africa, we do have this at a secondary level, the software, I think it's called Siyavula, where students do get these questions that are presented in a very similar style to this numbers thing, where it's it's randomized to some extent. As far as I know, it's not used as a diagnostic tool, but it is used for a lot of students to practice. And I think maybe sort of tying into what you were saying about self-diagnosis, I know for a fact that when I'm tutoring a student, they get a sense that they haven't mastered the subject until they've gotten I think it's like all full stars on the topic they've done. And the only way to do that is to consistently get the questions right again and again and again, for a given number of times in a row. So perhaps that's a sort of way, even though it's not being used as a diagnostic tool for universities, to help students self-diagnose themselves a little bit better, given they don't always have such a good sense of what they know coming from classes.
And that's a free resource, is it?
So I'm unsure if it's free for students to use. Is it free? So yeah, okay, that's good to know. Because
Limited,
yes,
but it is funded by all sorts of
Okay.
programs.
because I know you can't sign up for it if you don't have if you're not doing it through a school. But I think this be able to do it through a school and they'd be able to get a license for free. Okay, that's
Okay.
good.
And there's some content that you can access regardless.
Oh really? Okay,
Some of the things.
that's good to know.
But I wonder if university students who maybe have some gaps to fill
Yeah.
could continue to use that
Continue to
resource.
Yeah.
But again, that's
Station again, it
Yeah.
could be made with Mark, who is.
yeah.
We can,
And if you could connect that to the NBTs,
yeah,
that makes sense because that's the audience. You don't take the NBT if you're not planning to come to university on the whole.
Yeah, it's good.
NBT is the national benchmark test.
Yeah.
So Tatiana's unit is responsible for running those across the country.
And just to add, one nice thing about our curriculum is very open up. We have financial math, which as us engineers, we only probably use it in the fourth year when they remind us
Yeah.
for investment choices in maintenance management subject. But at least what's nice is that you can separate sections, say, okay, you need to know algebra, you need to know calculus, you need to know trigonometry. We don't care about probabilities, stats right now. So we can just easily just align, whatever. Because I know with business, you need to know financial math, that basic compound interest formula. So that's, advantage, but also,
Yeah.
So no one cares about probability. I always laugh, even when they say they skip stats and probability. It's just like, everyone decides to skip. Until business or you have to stats one, stats two, part of your, I have data and I have to do stats.
We've got a question online, and that is the diagnostic test mandatory at your institutions, and to what degree are the lecturers involved in the designing of the concept maps?
Good question. Not mandatory. But when you offer 3% to the students, you get very high engagement. The lectures didn't have so much to do with the design of our diagnostic, but we did give them a simple Google form and ask them to, I think, maybe tick boxes and say, this is how we're defining the basics of your course, having read your module descriptor. Because some module descriptors are maybe 20 years old and a lecturer has never revamped them. I think that's not allowed anymore, but we're getting better at that. But we did look at the course, and the course learning description might say you're going to cover Cauchy-Riemann equations, whatever it is. So we kind of then used our informed knowledge. This is what they're going to need for that. But then we would ask the lecturer, do you agree that they will need how to solve a quadratic, how to complete the square? And they would just tick boxes. I think we did that with the 5 lectures and we got a very strong overlap. So that gave us a little bit of reassurance, but they didn't have any input into, don't think you should ask that question. I think you should ask this question,
Right.
because then it becomes very opinion based. And we tried to be as scientific as we could and look at lots of diagnostic tests around the world and see what worked well and what didn't work so well. So but that's not to say we don't invite the lecturer, but typically lecturers don't have time to do that kind of stuff. So yeah, but offering them the carrot of 2 or 3%, huge engagement.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's mandatory at my institution. The domain is fixed. We as an institution, as a department, several of us had some inputs many over a decade ago to expand the domain. The original domain was 180 topics, but we worked very closely with the researchers at University of California, Irvine and Alex to expand it to 314. Part of the reason that I like a common fixed domain is that for longitudinal data gathering, you know, if the domain changes, everything changes, but also peer-to-peer institution studies. And so I was able to look at all the results that we had at our institution and go to another institution with a different population, say, are you seeing the same things I'm seeing? Or is this specific to what we do or what we're teaching or our text? And that was very informative.
So of those 314 topics, do you have subsections that certain students will do? Well,
No.
this is for everyone. Does the same test of 314
But it's
questions or
adaptive.
topics?
There are 314 concept notes,
Okay.
but because it's adaptive,
Right.
a student's only going to see about 20 to 25 questions.
Ah,
But it populates,
right.
you know, yes or
Amazing.
no on all 314.
Wow. So this is making so much more sense. Wow, we organized this well because
It's almost like we planned it.
But
Just-
at
yeah.
UNSW, we're still in the process of developing our diagnostic, but I'm part of a working group that's across the university. So we have buy-in from engineering, business, bioscience, maths, the college. And we're talking to lecturers and coordinators at each of the levels. Obviously, it's not compulsory at this stage, but the intention down the line is that it will get to that point.
good. So time-wise, we're doing well. We've still got another 12 minutes. So I think there were some more questions.
So I mean, I'm assuming in situations where the diagnostic test isn't compulsory, then students will sort of have full carte blanche to decide what courses they want to take after the test. So maybe it's sort of recommended that they take sort of either less or more advanced courses based on, but they're still sort of able to decide what they want to do. Is there often pushback from students based on the sort of results they get that they want to, you know, either they want to sort of push for a course which this sort of test that wouldn't recommend that they do, or something like that?
With us, we're very inflexible when compared to the United States. Okay. So if they're coming into a course, everything is so if they get into an engineering degree, they have to do physics for engineers, mathematics for engineers, science we've a little bit, so just within the mathematics. So if they're doing a science degree and they want to specialize, say, in physics, astrophysics or mathematics, they have to do the higher level calculus. Whereas if they want to do biology, geology, earth sciences, they can do the middle level calculus, we call, but there's not a whole lot of flexibility. You will find people want to drop from the higher level calculus to the middle level calculus, but that has repercussions for their degree choices then in year 2. They're now closing off physics, closing off astrophysics, closing off financial mathematics. So it's we don't have the same flexibility, and we don't have a rerun of courses as much as the United States. I guess it's a resource issue.
At Western Sydney, we used to have a diagnostic between the Maths for Engineers preliminary and Maths for Engineers 1. So originally, students used to be enrolled in Maths for Engineers 1. They were encouraged to do the diagnostic, and if they didn't do well, drop back to preliminary. Very few of them would do that. So what we ended up doing was enrolling all the students in preliminary, and then if they felt that they had the skills to go directly to Engineers 1, then they did the diagnostic, and if they got a good enough mark, they could be transferred.
Yes, I just got a crazy idea. I was just thinking maybe like, imagine having like one massive diagnostic test. Once you complete it, it'll tell you, stay with, be an engineer, or be like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or if you get this kind of maths right, you should actually be, it's just a thought I have.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's actually, this is quite powerful in terms of, you can actually find out
Yeah.
a lot more by just, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
One of my colleagues in Queensland have a diagnostic that was kind of similar to that. They did this before coming into first year, and it would then recommend which of the math subjects they should take in first semester, or which ones they should defer to second semester or later.
That's a good idea.
I had a colleague at Boulder, this was a very long time ago, but they took the math diagnostic, which was only intended for math courses, and looked at student success in all the other classes on campus. He was in the chancellor's office, so I think he had money. And it was like that quantitative, score was really predictive of political science, history, I mean, econ, like all these courses across campus.
What a guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've done some of that.
And so it's back to that, if they're coming to higher ed and they're struggling quantitatively, they're probably struggling in other areas. If they're strong quantitatively, they're probably strong in other areas. So that quantitative is a really big measure. And so I think if you can only do one, adaptive diagnostic and have supports to it, I think it's probably the most powerful one to get good information to support students. And at least our institution, everybody has to take a quantitative course. You cannot earn your degree without one. And there's certainly courses and units on campus that are probably lovely, but you don't necessarily have to ever visit them to graduate. In fact, I looked that 87% of students who graduate from our institution took a math class, independent of what their area of study was.
And what makes you do you think after someone is take the month test and the month diagnosis, which he actually is now predestined to do engineering, he started now, but he came there after maybe the first test, then he's been identified as a student at risk, particularly in math. So what will be the intervention? Because before he started, through the test, he shows that he's able to do engineering, but then when you get to actually started, then he failed mathematics after the first test. When we identify student at risk, we realize that out of, for example, 2 tests, it's been failing. What is the intervention that's going to be put in place for such a student?
If they fail their first, so again, we looked at the kind of predictive power of the maths fit, so the false positives and the false negatives. So you did badly in maths fit, but you got a really good final score. Maybe you just didn't care. Again, we can't know about every single student. Some students just click the buttons, they don't care what they get, they know they're good at maths, click the buttons, get to the end of the test, finish. Other students just doing really poorly. So I can show you a little bit of stats later on around the amount of false positives and false negatives that didn't predict at all where we thought they might end up. But typically, if they do fail the first semester module, it's just more back to the math support center, trying to get them in the door physically, get them to revise stuff. But that can be challenging because they want to move on with their other modules. They don't want to be doing mathematics again. So we tend to ignore the stuff that we need to work most at. We just put that away in our mind and say it'll somehow solve itself, but it doesn't happen. But
I think that's a lot of what you do, Anita. I mean, looking at what is a holistic approach. I mean, because you demonstrated that in theory, you are quantitatively prepared. So what else is going on? Are you not sleeping? Do you not know how to study? Do you not know how to take notes? Are you online video gaming, 20 hours a day? I mean, there's a lot of things that happen because all these kids just left home and all of a sudden no one's around telling them what to do anymore. And so I have seen a lot of times that first exam failure doesn't have much to do with the math background. They had to prove to be there. It's, what it takes to show up to go to class and do the work.
Yeah.
And so then we need that holistic help from other folks to come help those students get
Yeah,
this sort of track.
The other thing we found is, or we found at Western Sydney, was that there were quite a few students with learning disabilities or learning problems who were undiagnosed. Now, I mean, we're not qualified to diagnose those, but we could see something was going on. We were able to refer them to the student support services that could help them, and that was able to.
Yeah. And
help them
another
improve.
PhD student at the moment, and he's working on kind of the barriers to higher education mathematics students that have dyslexia, that have a diagnosis of dyslexia. And again, this type of thing is not great for dyslexic students because multiple choice, it doesn't suit disadvantaged students, because they don't see the difference between option A and option B. The mind doesn't process it as quickly as others. So there's a whole different type of diagnostic test we have to develop for those students, and those students are bigger in number than ever before. They're coming through, like if maybe 30% of the class you're looking at will have some sort of diagnosis that we can check. We can go and see, is it dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia? So it's an issue that we're putting more of a burden on that type of student that's already disadvantaged. But that's a talk for another day.
Yeah.
Tatiana, do you still have something to say?
Yeah, it's actually a question for Alison. PPL and SATs, do you draw any comparisons at all?
So I have a lot of data pre-PPL. So in terms of, we looked at in the ACT and SAT, and the issue with those exams is that they're normed. And so every single year, getting that score can mean something very different from another year. And so when we looked at the score versus grades in particular classes, it was like a flat line. There was no association at all. And ACT and SAT are very, come out and say, we are not designed as a placement exam, where it's a general exam for readiness to institution. And so when we looked at ALEC scores and ACT, SAT scores, we saw there was nothing. It was like comparing apples and wrenches. I mean, there was just like nothing at all. But what will be really interesting is PPL is expanding into calculus. And we do have the AP calculus exam in the US, which is a for-profit company that gives you calculus credit for students who went to really wealthy schools in the first place who probably don't need it. But that's a conversation for another day. But what's going to happen if and AP is also a normed exam, and there's even a lot of data, if you take it at a particular time of year, you're likely to get a better score, depending when you sit the exam. What's going to happen if those scores have a misalignment? So that's sort of, I'm just ready to go on that. So that's a long answer to here made no information. And in the future, I think we're going to have the battle, two big forces, see what happens. And I'm hoping to be in the referee with a whistle. There was a question here, Anita, in the middle.
Oh yeah, I had a question. Maybe I should have asked it earlier, but I mean, I was really quite intrigued when you talked about policy making, just in general. How did you maneuver around different university structures, in terms of making this adaptive diagnostic testing maybe fashionable? How receptive was the management? How receptive is the different, university structures? Because we all have these great ideas, and then we have this huge block, because of policies that are already there, traditional policies sometimes. And this, prevents us from implementing this great idea. So that's why I'm asking this question also. I don't know.
Okay. So at least for me, where it started initially is I started within my own department, in the math department, because we had the highest non-success rates campus-wide, 4 times the campus average. And there was a long time that was acceptable. like, well, if you can't pass calculus, we don't want you in engineering. I mean, we were kind of like the door bouncers. And, but there was this moment in time that was no longer popular. Like, we don't want to be the gatekeepers. We want to help students be successful. So I figured out who in my department to get support from. And then we just decided that we were going to roll it out in the math courses. Well, then the next thing that's very helpful is to piss off, sorry for the language, someone very powerful, which is what I did. I infuriated the dean of engineering, which is probably the most powerful college on our campus, because he thought that I had no right to be doing what I was doing. And so the minute you piss off this person and they're in a different college than here, then it escalates very rapidly to the people who are in beautiful offices with very nice suits to bring it to a conversation. So I think you have to figure out who's going to support you, who you're going to ruffle their feathers, and then how does that get to the attention of someone very high up to say, well, you have a point and you have a point, so where's the middle ground? And so that's how it played out for me. And at the end of the day, if it had not gone well, I would have been out of a job. But because it went well, the person who was, you know, at the top saying, well, what a wonderful thing we did here, and then gets to take credit.
Yeah.
But once you have support.
Some
Yeah,
support,
don't piss off everyone.
yeah.
Yeah.
Then you want to go this way, but then you have to have someone who has real power.
Yeah, I think keep your head low for a number of years, gather the data, don't tell anyone about it. If the data is good, then take your head above the parapet. I mean, our biggest opponents are the mathematics department. Our own people, they're the biggest, they refuse to believe diagnostic testing is a good idea. They think it's unfair, lots of reasons. But our registrar, who's kind of the head of all students, he heard about our diagnostic testing. He emailed me, thought it was a brilliant idea. Can we charge money to get all students coming, international students, Chinese students, Saudi students? Can we charge them €90, €100 to take this diagnostic test? So he saw it as a money spinner. We quickly got out of that. But outside of the maths department, people love it. But which is great because you want people to challenge, and I think mathematicians, I'm biased, but I just think they're good at administration as well. They're good at thinking things through. So you want them to be your biggest challenger, I think, in some sense. All right.
Did you bring them back?
You've ruffled some feathers. Some people you will fall out with professionally, and other people you can bring on side with time and with data and with evidence. You know, mathematicians tend to look at the science as well, but some people just have strong belief. You're not diagnosing my students, no way. It's just black and white for them.
Right, well, I tell you what, if you want to carry on chatting, it is officially lunch. So I will go and find out.
Oh, one moment,
yes?
we need a head count for dinner.
Oh, yes, please. And there's also a list if you want to share your email addresses, then we can do that. So if you have not added and you want to, if you're online and you want to put in your email address for sharing anything, then we can do that. Anyone who wants to come to dinner tonight, there were people who said yes, no, maybe on the form before. So it's going to Barristers 5:30. It's going to be an early dinner. It's eat what you want. So you can even just come and sit, have a drink, perhaps, or whatever you want. So we're going to just phone through to confirm the booking. So any takers? Okay. Then online, I don't know if there's anyone sitting online who still wants to come. I don't see a hand up. All right, well, that is fine. Okay, so we're going to pause now and resume at 1:30.
Thanks, Anita.
All right.
1 o'clock or 1:30?
Okay, we got a yes, please include me with information sharing. Yes, Ilse. Thank you, Ilse, and Pretty George as well.
Keeping our heads down and gathering that. That's the title of our next symposium.
Okay. We are resuming at 1.
Okay.
And 1 to 1:15 is a recap. So if we start a little bit later, I think that's probably about fine.
So it's just a form.
People online, if you struggle to hear us, then you just let us know. We don't have the screen share happening though.
Yeah, that's what we want to show, isn't it?
On Zoom, but I guess, is that not yet,
Okay.
but it is going to come.
That, Alison? We can have,
Okay,
are we recording again now?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, welcome back, everybody. So my job for the next 15 minutes, once every 15 minutes, is to recap what we did this morning, which I'll do in about 15 seconds. Give more time to Alison because we accidentally shortchanged Alison this morning, gave her less time than we should have. Just want to thank Anita for putting this all together. It's an amazing day. We're really privileged to be.